We are now going to talk about reflexive verbs. First of all, what are they? What are reflexive verbs? These are verbs that end in arse, erse, or irse. Notice that if you took away the se on the end of each of these, it's just an AR, ER, IR verb. A way that you can remember that there's a little more to them and that there's still a verb is you can think about, well, reflexive verbs, they're kind of a pain in the arse. So if that helps you remember, this is how at least the AR verbs end, then go for it. Think of it in that way. Examples would be lavarse, verse, and vestirse. Notice the endings. Lavarse literally means to wash oneself. Verse, literally to see oneself. And vestirse is to dress oneself. So another way that you can think about reflexive verbs is that they reflect each other. So you're going to have a pronoun that reflects your ending as well. That's why we have the oneself down here in English. We wouldn't likely say these things in this way, but remember this is Spanish, so things are going to work a little bit differently. All right, so what are they? We covered that. How are they conjugated? So, reflexive verbs, they're kind of a pain in the arse, if you remember. There's 2 steps for conjugating, which is different than a regular verb. You would just have 1 step, so that could explain why they're such a pain. First step, you have to look at reflexive pronouns. And you have to figure out which reflexive pronoun do I need to use based off of who is doing the action. So reflexive pronouns look like this. For when you're talking about yourself, you use me. When you're talking about you, use te. When you're talking about he or she, or you formal with usted, you use se. Nos refers to we. Os refers to you all in Spain. And then se is they or you all everywhere else. All right, so this is what it looks like. First, you're figuring out which reflexive pronoun do I use. So you look at your chart. If you don't know which one each of these refer to, make sure that you take extra notes there. Then you write that down first. All right, so then you'll have out front one of these pronouns. Now you're just going to look at your verb. So you have lavarse, for example, and then you just conjugate it like you would normally, depending on the tense you're using. Conjugate for the correct person doing the action. And then note that this is the same person that the reflexive pronoun is referring to as well. So another way that people think about reflexive verbs is that they have 2 parts that reflect each other. The reflexive pronoun reflects the person that the conjugation also shows. And some examples of this will help you. All right, so let's look at those examples. So examples of reflexive verbs. So lavarse, again, to wash oneself. Say you want to say, I wash myself. In English, we wouldn't generally say this, but this is like a direct translation. A more fluid translation would be like, I bathe. or I clean myself up, or something along those lines. So we're using lavarse. So if we go back to our steps, first we're going to deal with the reflexive pronoun. And since we're talking about I, me is the reflexive pronoun that we want. Me. Now we're just going to look, we already took care of the se at the end. Now we're just going to look at lavar. And we'll just use present tense here, but if it happened in the past, if you're talking about when you bathed in the past, you would just change your ending to a past tense ending. But here we're just talking about present tense. So lavar, the AR comes off and you put an O for I wash. So me lavo becomes I wash myself or I bathe. So here we have, just to show you again our steps. Number 1, reflexive pronoun. Number 2, conjugated form of lavar. I recommend that you guys write these down with me, especially if you're going to need to practice these more in the future. So now let's still stick with lavarse, but a different person will be doing the action. So we use they. They wash themselves. Again, we wouldn't really say that in English very often, but we might say they bathe or they take a bath. They bathe. All right, so they wash themselves. First, what is the reflexive pronoun for they? So again, if we go back to our notes from before, so here's the section that talks about they, so we'll put a se out front. Se, and now the verb lavar, except for they, and we'll keep it in present tense, so you have an A at N ending. Se lavan. They wash themselves. Here we have step number 1. Here we have step number 2. All right, one more quick example. Verse, to see oneself. We'll do this one with you see yourself. Maybe you're looking at yourself in the mirror, for example. So let's see. You see yourself, we're using the verb verse. First, we have to deal with the reflexive pronoun up front. What is the reflexive pronoun when you are talking about you? It's in this section, te. So we're going to pull te out front. Te. Now we're dealing with the verb ver, and we want to say you see. So you have an es ending for present tense. Te ves, you see yourself. A note about reflexive verbs, most of them come, are sort of morning routine words, like lavarse, despertarse, like to wake oneself up, cepillarse, to brush oneself. So again, they sound kind of strange, directly translated in English, but in Spanish it would sound strange or just be incorrect, or they wouldn't understand you if you left out the pronoun part. So this is a quick example of what they might look like. Feel free to ask me questions and comments, and I'll get back to them as soon as I can. Espero que estén bien y que tengan un buen día. Chao.